Recording.
Alrighty, guys. Good morning and welcome back. I wanted to discuss antidepressant agents today. But then again, as a mode of disclaimer, I want to say that this is just basic 101 antidepressant 101. But rather than discussing the concepts itself or themselves, what I want to say is that the most important thing when it comes to understanding some of these medications is to establish patterns, right? See if you can establish some of the patterns that you're going to encounter while studying this information. For example, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the basic stuff in here. We are going to be looking at antidepressant agents. First and foremost, divide and conquer, right? So we know this is antidepressant. So it's against depression. And obviously, agents means that it is a medication, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the next step, right? The actions of antidepressants, they can do several things. They can either inhibit, leading to an increase. They can block reuptake, leading to an increase, because if you're blocking reuptake, you're going to have that neurotransmitter being increased at that synapses, right? And then last but not least, they can regulate those receptor sites, leading then again to an accumulation of that neurotransmitter. So it's all about, right, that synapses. And I'm not the best at drawing, but just consider these one wire, another wire, and that wire in the middle is not connected. Right? It's like two wires connected to a bucket, right? Unless you fill this bucket with some type of solution, right? The electricity then will not go from point A to point B, right? And this solution in the middle is what we call a neurotransmitter. So with that being said, the important thing to establish here is number one, that you have to have one neurotransmitter in that synapses. Number two, enough of it to have a good conduction, right? So these medications, when these neurotransmitters fall, then you go into depression, right? And this is a general idea, but let's just say that if you have a wire and another wire and you have a bucket in the middle and that bucket is empty, you know, the electricity that you are transmitting through this wire will not get to this wire because this bucket is empty, right? However, if you were to fill this bucket with some type of solution, and in this case, we're going to call that a transmitter, right? Then the electricity will be able to go through and continue traveling down the wire to the end of its path, right? Now, here's the other thing though. This neurotransmitter needs to be not only in the bucket, but it needs to be sufficient. It needs to be sufficient neurotransmitter. If this neurotransmitter is just a tiny little bit, then the transmission of that electricity is going to be faulty. In other words, when that transmission is faulty, you get depressed. Okay, so and then again, this is a basic general idea, right? But that's the main point that I want to get across. Therefore, if I want to reverse that depression, I want to up that neurotransmitter somehow. Okay, so how does the medication? Well, it inhibits, right? And then it leads to an increase in norepinephrine and so on and so forth, right? This is the neurotransmitter at that synaptic point, right? But it can also block reuptake. In other words, you have that bucket is full of that solution, and what this medication does is it blocks it from going away, keeps it here for longer time, okay? And blocking that permits the solution to be here, and therefore the electrical impulse to go through, right? So leading to increased neurotransmitter levels at that synaptic point. And last but not least, it regulates receptor sites, right? And it also regulates the breakdown of that particular neurotransmitter. And when you regulate that breakdown, you slow it down to a point, you lead to an accumulation of it. In other words, you accumulate. And the more you accumulate, the better that signal is going to go through. Simple as that, right? All right, so move on. Classification of antidepressant. And generally speaking, we're going to divide them in TCAs, MIOIs, SSRIs, and SNRIs. In this video, we're going to take a look at these guys, TCAs. But here's the thing that I want you to see, right? TCAs and MIOIs are pretty simple, right? TCAs are tricyclic, and what I want you to do is not only to establish patterns, but to establish the differences, right? Because once you see not only what's equal, but what's different, you'll be able to differentiate between A and B and C, right? So how are we going to remember these? Well, some of them are tricyclic, and the other one, MIOIs. These are pretty simple. How are we going to differentiate these two? Well, this guy here's the MIOIs are pretty bad. They're old medications, and they react to just about everything under the sky. So these guys are very dangerous, right? Now, when it comes to SSRIs and SNRIs, it's pretty simple. One will take care of serotonin, right? And again, that bucket full of serotonin. And the other one will take care of serotonin and norepinephrine. Okay, so bucket full of the two of them in there. Okay. Generally speaking, then again, this is something very basic, 101. We're not going deep into this. For that, you have a full, classroom session for that, a lecture. Okay. Now let's talk about tricyclic antidepressants. And here is what we're going to go, rather than explain the medication, everything like that, we're going to go more onto establishing patterns, right? And shrinking the information to a bite size chunk that you can manage, right? So how about, instead of reading all these PowerPoint slides, how about we do it this other way, right? Tricyclic antidepressants, they reduce uptake, right? And when they reduce uptake, therefore, they increase that neurotransmitter in the bucket, right? The other thing is that they're used for depression and for sleep disorders. And the one thing that's very, very important about them is that they are treated as an adjuvant medication for chronic pain. Remember when we discussed in MedSurg about medications for pain, analgesia versus adjuvants, right? Well, this is what it means. These are the type of medications that are used widely in chronic pain management, as well as antidepressant, okay? Number two, they peak about 2 to 4 hours, very important in terms of people that may not be able to metabolize and or excrete accordingly. And therefore, it's metabolized in the liver, excreted in the urine. And when it comes to contraindication, guys, this is a pretty simple standard procedure, right? When it comes to contraindication, pregnancy and lactation, these are the very bad guys. This is what's important. But also take a look at these. This here is what I call standard procedure, right? Because this is inherently present for every medication out there, not just antidepressants, right? If you are allergic to this medication, it is a contraindication. So therefore, this is something that, immediately you have to know about every single medication. So don't learn this. Learn it one time. Every medication has a problem with allergies. That's it. You don't have to learn it ever again. It applies to every single medication. That's what I call standard procedure, right? And then last but not least, of course, if you have an MI, myelography, so on and so forth, but the main guy here, pregnancy and lactation, because here it can cause damage, serious damage, as you can probably figure by now. And then number three, some of the cautions, and I want you to take a look at these are contraindications, very different from cautions, right? In here, we're gonna use some cautions in the case of cardiovascular disease, in the case of glaucoma, and urinary retention, right? And this is something that we will discuss in class. Right? Now, moving on, adverse effects. These guys over here are standard procedure for just about every medication out there, especially psych medication, constipation, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea as well. You can throw diarrhea in there. That's standard for every single medication out there, right? So you do not have to learn those but one time. It's constipation, nausea, and vomiting, and diarrhea. Boom, everyone. So once you get that out of the way, then you have to establish, okay, so what else? What else do I need to know? What else do I need to learn specific to that medication? Because these here is not specific to that medication. This here is specific to every medication on this earth. Okay, so, well, depressants and tricyclic antidepressants can give you some sedation, sleep problems, hallucinations, right? If you have sleep disturbances, you're gonna be fatigued, right? It's kind of self-explanatory, right? And ataxia and dry mouth. So technically, you need to learn sedation, ataxia, dry mouth, and hallucination. Because if you're gonna have some type of problem with sleep, whether you sleep too much or too little, there's gonna be some fatigue. See it? So critical thinking, guys. So you don't have to remember, you just need to understand. Okay? And then last but not least, what I do want to say is that they do have a drug-to-drug interaction with certain medications. Number one, and I know this is not a tricyclic antidepressant, but the tricyclic antidepressants will react with MIOIs. And these guys are pretty bad. They're very bad. They're all medication, and they react to just about everything under the sky. They do not get along well with anyone. So MIOIs, whenever you see an MIOI, there is always a concern about drug-to-drug interaction. Okay, but other than that, tricyclic antidepressants will react with cimetidine, fluoxetine, ranitidine. But if you take a look at them, then again, guys, it's all about patterns, right? Take a look at these. It's all about patterns, right? And then last but not least, anticoagulation. So what do we have to learn here about drug-drug interaction, right? MIOIs, which is standard procedure because they react with everything, and anticoagulation, because the rest of them are a thread. You can thread them, right? They're a pattern that you can see. Okay. And with that being said, guys, that was tricyclic antidepressants, and hopefully it helped. Any further questions or concerns, please like the video or make a comment. Let me know what it is that you need and what you want so I can tailor my answer to that. And thank you very much for being here, and more to come.